When it comes to the world of ballistics, there is an ongoing debate that has raged in gun shops, at firing ranges, and in online forums for decades. It is the classic confrontation between two giants of the handgun world, the high-capacity, efficient 9mm Parabellum and the raw, heavy-hitting .357 Magnum. To the casual observer, it might seem like a simple choice between speed and power. However, as we look closer at the data, the history, and the physics of these two rounds, a startling truth emerges. There is a cartridge in this discussion that most people are carrying for a specific job, a job it actually stopped being the best at nearly 40 years ago. Even more surprising is the fact that this same cartridge is genuinely one of the most versatile and capable rounds in existence, but only if you stop putting it into the type of firearm that almost everyone associates with it. What's up, everyone? This is Tony from Gun 45, and today we are going to deconstruct the myth of the ultimate caliber. We are going to prove that one of these rounds, in a very specific and quantifiable way, has become effectively useless for modern self-defense, while simultaneously being a hidden powerhouse in another category entirely. Understanding the why behind this will completely shift the way you look at your gear, your training, and your strategy for personal protection. Before we dive into the ballistics gelatin and the chronographs, I have a quick request. If you find this deep dive into firearm engineering and history valuable, please consider hitting that like button and subscribing to Gun 45. We pride ourselves on providing evidence-based analysis rather than just following popular trends, and your support is what allows us to keep the lights on and the cameras rolling. To understand where we are today, we have to look back at the origins of these two cartridges, because they represent two completely different philosophies of engineering. The 9mm Parabellum is the elder statesman here, designed in 1901 by Georg Luger. It was built from the ground up as a military pistol round, intended to provide a balance of manageable recoil and effective terminal performance in the emerging world of semi-automatic handguns. For the first half of the 20th century, however, many American shooters viewed the 9mm with deep suspicion. It was often dismissed as a weak European round, lacking the stopping power of the larger .45 ACP, or the heavy revolvers that dominated the American landscape. Then, the world changed. As we entered the latter half of the century, material science and bullet technology underwent a revolution. The development of the high-performance jacketed hollow point, JHP, changed the calculus. Suddenly, the 9mm didn't have to rely solely on its diameter. It could expand reliably, creating a larger permanent wound cavity while maintaining enough velocity to penetrate deep into vital organs. By the time the FBI and major law enforcement agencies conducted their exhaustive testing in the late 1980s and early 90s, the experts realized that the 9mm provided everything a professional needed. It wasn't that the 9mm gained more physical energy, it's that the bullet got smarter. On the other side of the ring, we have the .357 Magnum. Arriving in 1934, it was the monster of its era. It was the brainchild of Elmer Keith and Philip Sharp, developed in collaboration with Smith & Wesson and Winchester. The goal was simple: take the existing 38 Special and push it to the absolute limit. They wanted a round that could punch through the car doors and primitive body armor used by gangsters during the Prohibition era, threats that were effectively shrugging off standard handgun fire. When it hit the market, .357 Magnum was the undisputed king. For 50 years, it was the benchmark against which every other handgun round was measured. If you were a law enforcement officer and you wanted the absolute best one-shot stop reputation on your hip, you carried a .357 Magnum revolver. But here we are in the mid-2020s, and we have to ask, does that king still wear a crown? To answer that, let's look at round 1, power on paper. If we strictly look at the numbers, the .357 Magnum wins this fight with ease. Out of a standard 4-inch revolver, a typical 125-grain Magnum load will scream out of the muzzle at roughly 1,450 feet per second, producing about 580 foot-pounds of energy. Some specialized boutique loads can even push that energy past the 600 mark. Compare that to a high-quality 9mm defensive load, let's say a 124 grain plus P round. Out of a 4-inch semi-auto barrel, that 9mm is moving at about 1,180 feet per second, with roughly 380 foot-pounds of energy. On a spreadsheet, the .357 Magnum is carrying approximately 65% more kinetic energy. It is a blowout. However, the spreadsheet doesn't tell the whole story. A handgun's primary role for 99% of owners is stopping a human threat at close range. In that specific context, paper energy is largely irrelevant once you hit a certain threshold. Both the 9mm and the .357 Magnum, when loaded with modern hollow points, pass the gold standard of ballistics, the FBI protocol. This test requires a bullet to penetrate between 12 and 18 inches into calibrated ballistic gelatin, while expanding to a larger diameter. If a 9mm penetrates 14 inches and expands to .60 caliber, and a .357 Magnum also penetrates 14 inches and expands to .60 caliber, they have achieved the exact same result in terms of terminal tissue damage. The extra energy of the Magnum doesn't create a second shockwave or a magical stopping mechanism. That extra energy is simply wasted as the bullet exits the back of the target or is absorbed by the surrounding environment. In the world of modern ballistics, the 9mm has effectively closed the gap, rendering the Magnum's extra power unnecessary for self-defense. This brings us to the three critical areas where the 9mm doesn't just tie the Magnum, it completely dominates it. The first is recoil and shot recovery. Physics dictates that for every action there is an equal and opposite reaction. The 9mm firing out of a modern service pistol produces a mild, manageable recoil pulse of about 4 to 6 foot-pounds. This allows the shooter to keep their sights on target and deliver rapid, accurate follow-up shots. The .357 Magnum, by contrast, generates between 10 and 13 foot-pounds of recoil. In a lightweight snub-nose carry revolver, that recoil becomes a violent, bone-jarring snap, accompanied by a blinding muzzle flash and a deafening concussion. In a high-stress defensive encounter, shot placement is the only thing that matters. A 9mm hit to a vital area is infinitely more effective than a .357 Magnum miss. Because the 9mm is easier to shoot accurately and quickly, it is the superior defensive tool for the average person. The second area is capacity. A standard full-size 9mm handgun holds between 15 and 17 rounds in the magazine, plus 1 in the chamber. Even compact carry versions usually offer 10 to 12 rounds. A typical revolver holds 6, maybe 7 if you're carrying a large, heavy-frame gun. In a dynamic fight involving multiple attackers, running out of ammunition is a catastrophic failure. Furthermore, reloading a semi-automatic with a fresh magazine takes a fraction of the time it takes to fumble with a revolver cylinder or a speed loader under duress. The third factor is the cost of mastery. To become truly proficient with a firearm, you need to practice. A lot. 9mm practice ammunition is the most affordable centerfire caliber on the market, usually costing half as much as .357 Magnum rounds. If you have a budget of $500 a year for training, the 9mm shooter gets twice as much range time as the Magnum shooter. Mastery is born of repetition, and the 9mm makes that repetition accessible. So, is the .357 Magnum truly useless? If we only look at it as a defensive handgun round in the modern era, the answer, honestly, is yes. It charges you a massive tax in recoil, capacity, and cost, but it gives you zero additional benefit in stopping power against a human threat compared to a modern 9mm. Carrying a snub-nose .357 for self-defense today is often more about nostalgia or feeling powerful than it is about making an evidence-based tactical choice. But here is where Tony and Gun 45 flip the script. The reason the .357 Magnum has struggled in the handgun world is that it was never truly a handgun cartridge to begin with. If you look at its design, a long, straight-walled case with a massive powder reservoir behind a relatively small .35 caliber projectile, you aren't looking at a pistol round. You are looking at a rifle round that has been handcuffed inside a 4-inch revolver barrel for 90 years. When you fire a .357 Magnum from a revolver, that massive fireball you see at the muzzle is actually unburned powder. The barrel is simply too short to utilize the cartridge's full potential. But when you take that same .357 Magnum round and fire it out of a 16-inch or 18-inch lever-action carbine, the monster finally wakes up. In the longer barrel, the powder has the time and space to burn completely, pushing that 125-grain bullet to velocities of 2,000 feet per second or higher. The energy doesn't just increase, it doubles. Suddenly, you have a 1,000-plus foot-pound projectile that shoots flat and hits with the authority of a dedicated hunting rifle. In this configuration, the .357 Magnum finds its true purpose. It becomes a legitimate tool for taking down deer, feral hogs, or defending against medium-sized predators, out to 100 yards. The recoil remains incredibly mild because it's being absorbed by a rifle stock, and the accuracy is phenomenal. This is a level of performance that the 9mm can never achieve. Even in a long carbine barrel, the 9mm only gains a small boost in velocity because it was designed to burn its powder quickly in short barrels. The 9mm is a pistol round that stays a pistol round, no matter what you fire it out of. The .357 Magnum is a rifle round that has finally found its home in the carbine. So here is the final verdict from Gun 45. If you are looking for a handgun to carry on your belt or keep on your nightstand for protection against a human threat, buy a 9mm. It is the more efficient, more controllable, and more practical choice. Stop apologizing for carrying a smaller caliber. Modern engineering has made it the king of the defensive handgun. However, if you own a .357 Magnum, stop asking it to be a carry gun. Instead, pair it with a high-quality lever-action carbine. In that role, you possess a versatile, powerful, and iconic survival tool that bridges the gap between a handgun and a full-powered rifle. The real question I have for you all in the comments is this. Now that we've looked at how the .357 Magnum's energy literally doubles when moved from a revolver to a carbine, does that change your perspective on the truck gun or the woods gun? Would you rather have a 9mm for the belt and a .357 lever action in the rack, or are you still a wheel gun purist? I want to see your arguments below. As always, if you enjoyed this technical breakdown, subscribe to Gun 45 for more honest, no-hype firearm analysis. I'm Tony, and remember, it's not just about the caliber, it's about mastering the tool for the right job. Stay sharp, stay safe, and I'll see you in the next one. Lock and load.